Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to the AEW Dynamite review. Dynamite tonight was from the MVP Arena in Albany in upstate New York. And the show just ended, and I gotta say, Dynamite tonight was an awesome show. This was a very good Dynamite tonight. Really enjoyed it. We had two of the semifinals match in the Grand Slam Tournament of Champions, which will conclude next week on Dynamite at Grand Slam from Arthur Ashe Stadium in Queens, which I will be there next week, and I can't wait. Grand Slam is shaping up to be an awesome show, and of course there will be no Dynamite review next week because I'll be there, so can't wait for next week. But for the semifinals match in the Grand Slam Tournament of Champions, we saw JON MOXLEY versus Sammy Guevara and BRYAN DANIELSON versus Chris Jericho, which was the main event of the show tonight. So those are the two semifinals match in the Grand Slam Tournament of Champions that we saw tonight. And then we had Jungle Boy versus Jay Lethal. The AEW World Tag Team Championship was on the line where Swerve in Our Glory, Swerve Strickland, and Keith Lee defend the titles against the Lucha Brothers, Penta Oscuro, and Rey Fenix. And we also saw Serena Deeb and Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, teaming up to take on Athena and the interim AEW Women's World Champion, Toni Storm. Overall, Dynamite tonight, very good show, awesome show, and we are on the road to Grand Slam next week, which is shaping up to be an awesome show. But anyways, let's jump right into the review. Dynamite opened up tonight with the first match in the semifinals Grand Slam Tournament of Champions. So it was JON MOXLEY versus Sammy Guevara. Very good match this was. Both of these guys gave it all they got here in the match. And surprisingly, Moxley didn't even bleed in this match. Because every time you see a JON MOXLEY match, there's 95% that he is going to be bleeding during the match. But unfortunately, he didn't bleed tonight. But Sammy Guevara, he ended up coming out by himself. No Ty Mello. So when he came out on his own, I'm like, okay, something's going to be going on. Ty Mello is going to come out there, cause a distraction to JON MOXLEY. So you all knew that was going to come. So we had Moxley end up coming out first, and he ended up coming out from the crowd, of course. William Regal was on commentary, so the crowd went nuts as Moxley ended up making his way out. So then Sammy Guevara came out. Like I said, no Ty Mello, his wife, Ty Mello, didn't come out there. So we all know something was going to happen later on in the match. So we had both Moxley and Guevara. They were trash talking to each other. Both men ended up blocking up. Moxley gained control of the match, locked in a side headlock on Sammy Guevara. So both guys did a test of strength in the corner. Guevara ended up coming back with some forearms, and he ended up booting Moxley in the corner. Moxley ended up coming out of the corner, and he ended up delivering a lariat to Sammy Guevara, which Sammy Guevara sold the hell out of that lariat. So then we have Moxley and Guevara. They were just chopping each other. So Moxley delivered an Irish whip that was reversed by Guevara. Guevara came back with a Tope Con Hero to Moxley, and then he did a flippin' senton. Guevara then threw Moxley into the ring steps and started stomping away at Moxley's face. So Guevara ended up hitting a stomp to Moxley into the ring steps. And then as Dynamite came back from the commercial, Guevara had Moxley on the apron. Guevara was looking to deliver a pile driver to Moxley, but Moxley reversed out of that, and he dropped Guevara face first onto the apron. Moxley then delivered a series of lariats in the corner to Guevara. Him and Sammy were up the top rope, and Moxley started biting away at Guevara. And then Moxley delivered a awesome looking butterfly suplex off the top rope. He then ended up going for an armbar. Guevara countered that into the Boston Crab. And Guevara then delivered a quick enziguri and a double rope cutter to Moxley. He ended up going for the cover. Moxley kicked out at 2. Guevara was looking to go for the GTH. Moxley countered that into the Bulldog choke. Guevara tried to escape out of that, but Moxley started pounding away with some elbows to Guevara. And then Mox went off the ropes and delivered a Spanish fly, which was great. So Mox ended up going for the cover, and Guevara ended up kicking out at 2. Guevara headed up to the top rope for a high-risk move. Moxley ended up catching Guevara, ended up hitting a avalanche German suplex to Guevara, so both men were down. And then we see Ty Mello and Anna Jay, Anna Cringe, end up coming out. So Anna Jay ended up throwing her jacket into the ring. Ty Mello ended up sneaking in, and Ty ended up low-blowing Moxley. So when I said earlier, Sammy Guevara came out there alone without his wife, Ty Mello, I said, something was going to happen later on. This is what happened. So Sammy, countered Moxley with a small package, and Moxley ended up kicking out at 2. So Guevara ended up missing a swanton. Moxley ended up coming back with a pin on Guevara. Guevara kicked out at 2. So at the end of the match, we had Moxley avoiding the GTH by Guevara. He ended up hitting the Death Rider to Guevara, and Mox went for the cover. There you go. Jon Moxley ended up winning the match. So he's moving on to the final match in the Grand Slam Tournament of Champions next week at Grand Slam. But very good match this was. I knew that Moxley was going to win this. So in my opinion, it came off predictable in the outcome. We all knew that Moxley was going to win this. But overall, this was a very good match. And then as Dynamite came back from the commercial, MJF ended up coming out. And the crowd popped highly for MJF. And MJF came out and he immediately yelled for them to cut his music and for Albany to keep their fat mouths shut. So MJF ended up saying that 7 days he hasn't slept since him and Moxley laid eyes on each other. And he ended up saying that it's because he saw the look of a man who has no fear and how much that pisses him off. MJF ended up saying that he isn't the same kid as before because he isn't playing a character. And he ended up saying, Moxley, you are. So he was like, oh, he's walking around all tough, big bad, and you're as bad as these people. He was saying that to Moxley. MJF ended up saying that he read Moxley's book and loved the part about his childhood and educated poor white trash scumbag from the sticks. So MJF ended up mentioning how Moxley got his bike stolen and was bullied. He ended up saying that it forced him to make a front. And it's why the morons of Albany are chanting your name. So MJF ended up saying that Moxley is the same poor, scared little boy from the slums of Cincinnati. And now he can drown his sorrows in alcohol, like a worthless drunk. So MJF called Moxley a worthless drunk. So MJF did give credit for Moxley for going through rehab. But MJF was like, oh, my brain is far more dangerous than your disease. So MJF ended up saying that bad things happen when you get in his way. So he was like to Moxley, take that vacation. Skip Arthur Ashe. Because you can't win my title. So he kept laying into Moxley. He was saying to Moxley, your demons said they would take it all away. And if you don't tread lightly, you'll find out I am that demon. And I am a demon you can't slay. So MJF then talked about Stokely Hathaway's group and how they helped him. So MJF referred to Stokely Hathaway's group as a faction on retainer. So he ended up letting Stokely Hathaway's group come out, and Stokely Hathaway's group is called The Firm. Yeah, that's the name of the group, The Firm. So out came Stokely Hathaway and Ethan Page and W. Morrissey, Lee Moriarty, and Austin and Colton Gunn. So they all came into the ring. MJF was no longer in the ring. So he left. So Stokely Hathaway got on the mic. He ended up saying that he flew from Orlando to New York to meet MJF, saying he wanted to quit before he decided it's time you get what you want. So Stokely ended up saying that he built this retainer as an insurance policy for MJF. Stokely ended up admitting that he isn't a publicist or a manager and no damn assistant. Stokely said that he's a friend, just a friend with some connections. He ended up saying that everything has been a hustle and a con since Double or Nothing. Stokely then ended up saying that the blackest berries have the sweetest juice. So he ended up giving W. Morrissey, this is big, formerly known as Big Cass, he gave Morrissey a hug. And Morrissey didn't look too pleased about that. So Morrissey looked like he didn't even want to be there. You could tell by the look on his face. So he ended up slinging out Lee Moriarty, Stokely Hathaway, ended up saying that Lee Moriarty should challenge for the ROH Pure Championship. So he got to Austin and Colton Gunn, the Gun Club, and Albany chanted "ass boys" to them. And then Stokely Hathaway ended up going to Ethan Page. Ethan Page ended up getting a favorable reaction from the crowd there in Albany. Page ended up saying that he wants to represent Canada and he wants to win the All-Atlantic Championship, which of course is held by PAC. He ended up saying that he wants to bring the All-Atlantic Championship home to a great nation like Canada. So Page ended up saying, either you run with us or run from us. And that was pretty much basically how the segment ended. But MJF, always good on the mic, always got to listen to what he has to say. And as for Stokely Hathaway's group, The Firm, I'm not really feeling this group. I mean, the only one, in my opinion, that stands out of this group is W. Morrissey. He stands out the most outside of Lee Moriarty and Ethan Page and the Gun Club. And Stokely Hathaway, he's always good on the mic. But not feeling this group so far. And then we had Jungle Boy versus Jay Lethal, to which Jungle Boy issued an open challenge. And Jay Lethal ended up accepting the challenge. And here Sanjay Dutt was going nuts in this little promo because Sanjay Dutt was like, oh, Jay Lethal, he is my friend. And then he said to Jungle Boy, oh, your friend Luchasaurus turned his back on you at All Out. So it's pretty much basically that in this little promo. But the match was pretty good between Jungle Boy and Jay Lethal here. Match started with both guys end up locking up, and Jungle Boy slapped the hell out of Jay Lethal because Jay Lethal ended up patting him on the head. So yeah, both guys delivered some elbows to each other, and Jungle Boy ended up delivering a drop kick to Jay Lethal, and there was pinfall attempts by Jungle Boy here, to which Jay Lethal kicked out of them. Jungle Boy managed to knock Jay Lethal out to the floor, and he ended up going for a suicide dive, but Satnam Singh got in the way. Satnam Singh ended up blocking Jungle Boy from delivering the suicide dive to Jay Lethal. So we had Jungle Boy end up going to the top turnbuckle. Sanjay Dutt ended up distracting Jungle Boy, which allowed Jay Lethal to drop Jungle Boy onto the top rope, and he was focusing on Jungle Boy's back. So Jay Lethal ended up placing his knee to the back of Jungle Boy. He started pressing Jungle Boy onto the ropes, and Jay Lethal followed up with a snap suplex. So we had Jungle Boy end up fighting back with some chops. Jungle Boy ended up exploding out of the corner, and he took out Jay Lethal. Both guys were down. So we had Jay Lethal and Jungle Boy. They were on their knees, and they started just throwing strikes and chops to each other. Jungle Boy ended up coming out and delivered a flying elbow to Jay Lethal. Jungle Boy tried to lift Jay Lethal up for a suplex, but of course his injured back gave out. So Jay Lethal ended up attempting to hit the lethal injection to Jungle Boy, but Jungle Boy avoided it, and he leveled Jay Lethal with a lariat. So Jay Lethal, once again, he was attempting to hit the lethal injection, and we had Jungle Boy end up reversing again, and Jay Lethal does hit the lethal combination, which Jay Lethal followed up with a tope suicida. So at the end of the match, Jungle Boy ended up locking in the snare trap, and Jay Lethal ended up tapping out, and there you go. Jungle Boy ended up winning the match. Overall, this was a very good match here. You had also Sanjay Dutt got involved, where he was causing a distraction to Jungle Boy, which Jungle Boy ended up knocking him off of the apron. But very good match between Jungle Boy and Jay Lethal. So then we had a video package shown of Hook and Action Bronson. And in this video package, they were training for their match against Matt Menard and Angelo Parker next week. So Bronson ended up saying that next week, him and Hook will whip Angelo Parker and Matt Menard's ass. So pretty much that was basically that. So then we saw Alex Marvez. Alex Marvez was backstage with Luigi Primo. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. But I haven't seen this guy's matches in the indies, but from what I understand, his gimmick is flipping pizzas. So he was shown for a second, only to be taken out by Ethan Page. So Ethan Page took him out, and then Danhausen ended up appearing. Page ended up saying that he wants to be the king of the Atlantic. So he ended up saying Friday on Rampage, he may as well start with the Jester. To which Danhausen ended up saying, yes, let's get that Jester. So it looks like it's probably going to be Ethan Page versus Danhausen Friday on Rampage. So pretty much that was basically that. So we're getting that match on Rampage Friday. And then we saw a video package and it showed Darby Allin participating in the Nitro Circus event, which took place this past Friday in Coney Island at Mamani's Park. I saw this on Darby's social media, and also Swerve Strickland was with him at the event. So Darby Allin at that Nitro Circus event, he did, I think, like a motor trike stunt where he was up on top and he raced down and flipped on the trike, something like that. But it's on his social media. But then it cut to Matt Hardy. Matt Hardy ended up telling Darby Allin that he needs to raise the bar even more. Matt Hardy ended up saying that he's a member, of course, of Team Extreme, which is of course, him and Jeff, and also, Lita, back then. Team Extreme was awesome, back in the day. When I was a kid, just watching Matt and Jeff Hardy go out there, being accompanied by Lita. So Matt Hardy then ended up saying that Darby Allin may be one of his best rivals and partners, and that he wants to get back to the top. So Matt Hardy ended up challenging Darby Allin to a match on Rampage for next week. So next week is going to be Matt Hardy versus Darby Allin. Going to witness that match live, there, for Rampage. Well, Rampage is going to be taped, so I'll be witnessing it live there at Arthur Ashe. So it's going to be an awesome match there. And then we had Powerhouse Hobbs versus Matt Dimartino from Albany there. Squash match. Hobbs ended up delivering a lariat to Dimartino and then hit a massive spine buster. Went for the cover. Powerhouse Hobbs wins. But post-match, Hobbs got on the mic and the crowd was chanting, "We want Ricky." So Hobbs ended up saying that at All Out, he defeated Ricky Starks. Now, I don't know if you all caught this, but when Hobbs was talking, his mouth was bleeding. And I'm like, how does his mouth bleed when he just squashed this guy? Squashed Matt Dimartino. So Hobbs ended up saying that Ricky Starks is tough, and he spent 21 months grinding, but it only took him 4 minutes to beat him. But he was like, who's counting? Hobbs ended up saying, now that's over, it is time to open a new chapter in the book of Hobbs. And that starts tonight. So then we saw Ricky Starks. Ricky Starks made his way through the crowd. Starks ended up evading security, and he got into the ring. And he went at it with Hobbs. And Starks ended up clocking Hobbs with the mic. So Hobbs ended up bailing out of the ring, and Starks' music ended up playing, and he posed in the ring, and pretty much that was basically that. So if Hobbs' mouth was bleeding, and that was supposed to be the spot that his mouth started bleeding, when Starks ended up hitting the mic at him, then that was a big botch there. That was a big botch when Hobbs was talking and you saw his mouth bleeding. I guess that was supposed to be the spot where, his mouth started to bleed, after Starks ended up clobbering him with the mic. So that was a big botch there. And then we had the AEW World Tag Team Championship on the line. Swerve and Our Glory, Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland defend the titles against the Lucha Brothers, Penta Oscuro, and Rey Fenix. Very entertaining match this was. Very good match. But predictable in the end because you have the World Tag Team Championship on the line. And Penta and Phoenix are two halves of the Trios champions. And Pac is the third half. So the match didn't make any sense because if Penta and Phoenix won the match, they would be the World Tag Team Champions and also two halves of the Trios champions. So you knew it was going to be predictable in the end. So Penta and Phoenix end up coming out accompanied by Alex Abrahantes, and they came out to a big ovation from the crowd, and they looked absolutely pumped up and ready to go against Swerve in Our Glory. Swerve in Our Glory, Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland end up coming out, got boos from the crowd, and the match started off with Penta delivering a face wash to Swerve, and Swerve ended up handstanding, and he ended up getting kicked, and Penta ended up getting kicked in the ribs. Phoenix ended up tagging in and delivered a drop kick to Swerve. Penta ended up flipping Phoenix onto Swerve, and he ended up going for the cover, to which Swerve ended up kicking out too. Phoenix and Swerve were bouncing on the top rope, and Swerve hit a springboard hurricanrana to Phoenix, which was good. Keith Lee then tagged in. Keith Lee delivered a overhand chop to Phoenix, which knocked Phoenix over, and Dynamite went to commercial. And then as Dynamite came back from the commercial, we had Phoenix start chopping away at Keith Lee's knees. Keith Lee ended up snapping, and he ended up throwing Phoenix into the corner. And Swerve ended up coming in, and he locked in the Gory Special. Phoenix was hanging onto the ropes when he was thrown out of the ring. Phoenix ended up trying to launch himself at Keith Lee, but he ended up getting caught. And then this spot in the match here was awesome, where you had Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland aiming for the Swerve Stomp, and Phoenix ended up nailing a springboard Spanish Fly, and Penta connected a Destroyer to Keith Lee. And I'd never seen Keith Lee sell the effects of the Destroyer, the Canadian Destroyer. It was a fantastic spot there. Swerve then ended up pushing Phoenix off the top rope. Keith Lee ended up reversing the momentum of Penta, and he ended up dropping Penta. So Keith Lee ended up going for the cover, and there you go. Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland, Swerve in Our Glory, won the match and retained the AEW World Tag Team Championship. Obviously, we all knew that was going to happen. Post-match, the Acclaimed end up coming out. So Max Caster got on the mic. He ended up saying, "Swerve, if you ever interrupt again, I'll beat your ass." He was like, keep not hugging the famous people you know. Roll Keith Lee the Grand Slam, and then the Acclaimed can be the new tag team champions. And then Bowens ended up saying, "We're going to beat your Drake and Josh looking asses. Now scissor me daddy ass." To which Billy Gunn ended up scissoring him. But that was funny when Bowens ended up calling Keith Lee and Swerve Drake and Josh looking asses. Oh man, that was great. But it's going to be Swerve in Our Glory versus the Acclaim next week. World Tag Team Championship on the line. So it should be a good match next week. And I'm going to have to call it. Maybe the Acclaimed will win the titles next week. So I would be happy if they won the titles next week at Arthur Ashe Stadium. So very much looking forward to the match. So then we had Alex Marvez. Alex Marvez was backstage with Pac, and he ended up asking about the bump in the road with the Lucha Brothers' loss to Swerve in Our Glory. Pac ended up telling Marvez to mind his business. And then Pac ended up getting laid out by Orange Cassidy. So Orange Cassidy ended up saying, double champion, huh? Not for long. So maybe Orange Cassidy wants a shot at the All-Atlantic Championship. So possibly going to get Orange Cassidy versus Pac for the All-Atlantic Championship, maybe. So we'll see where this goes. And then we have Serena Deeb and Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, versus Toni Storm and Athena. And this was a solid women's match. And you have the match started off with Serena Deeb and Toni Storm, and they ended up fighting for control of the match. Deeb ended up having Toni Storm in the corner, ended up hitting a series of chops to Toni Storm. Toni Storm came back with a few chops of her own to Serena Deeb. Athena then ended up tagging in, and she delivered a jumping splash over the top rope to Serena Deeb. And Athena ended up hitting a drop kick and a handspring elbow in the corner to Serena Deeb. So Athena delivered a modified jawbreaker. She ended up heading up to the top. Britt Baker ended up distracting Athena, and that led to Serena Deeb taking out Athena's knee. So then when Dynamite came back from the commercial, Athena ended up hitting a enziguri on Serena Deeb. Britt Baker and Toni Storm both ended up tagging in. Toni Storm delivered a drop kick to Baker and delivered an uppercut in the corner. So Toni Storm was going for a hip attack to Baker, but Rebel ended up blocking her. So we had Toni Storm delivering a DDT to Britt Baker. Britt Baker ended up avoiding a clothesline and ended up hitting a sling blade. So we had Serena Deeb and Athena end up tagging in. They were exchanging forearms. Athena springboard and Deeb ended up countering that into an armbar. So at the end of the match, we had Britt Baker end up coming in with a thrust kick to Athena, and Athena ended up getting launched into the ring steps. Rebel distracted the referee while Serena Deeb ended up sending Toni Storm headfirst into a chair that Britt Baker was holding. Serena Deeb ended up getting a roll-up, and there you go. Britt Baker and Serena Deeb ended up winning the match. Post-match, Athena ended up attacking both Baker and Serena Deeb, but she ended up eating a super kick from Baker, and Baker came back, delivered a stomp to Athena. Jamie Hayter ended up run down, ended up stealing the chair, and Jamie Hayter ended up hitting Toni Storm with the chair. Jamie Hayter didn't go after Britt Baker, but she left the ring. She was screaming at Britt Baker. So apparently, Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter, haven't spoken since All Out. So, overall, that was that. But this was a solid women's match. Solid women's tag team match. And Britt Baker, she's going to be appearing at Comic-Con this year, next month. And hopefully get a chance to meet her. So that would be cool. So hopefully I'll buy a photo op with her. She's only doing photo ops. She's not doing autographs. So hopefully get a photo with her. And then we saw a video package with Josh Woods, Tony Nese, and Mark Sterling. And they were hyping up the Ring of Honor TV Championship between Josh Woods and Samoa Joe, which we're going to see on Rampage. So that was basically that. But Samoa Joe, he's going to retain the TV Championship. Main event. The semifinals match in the Grand Slam Tournament of Champions. Chris Jericho versus Bryan Danielson. Very good match. This was good main event. We had the crowd singing along to Judas when Jericho made his way out. So then Bryan ended up coming out, and he came out to a huge applause from the crowd. So Bryan was the fan favorite going into this match. So Bryan started off the match with a bunch of chops and some roundhouse kicks to Jericho. He was beating the hell out of him. So Jericho ended up whipping him into the corner. Bryan came back and delivered a running drop kick. So we had both guys end up chopping each other. Bryan delivered another run drop kick in the corner to Jericho. He then delivered a headbutt to Jericho. And Danny Garcia was watching the match from backstage. So Jericho tossed out Bryan, and Bryan then delivered a drop kick to the outside to Jericho, and then a running knee off the apron onto Jericho, which was cool. So Bryan hammerlocked Jericho into the ring post, and he went up to the top, and he ended up hitting a drop kick to Jericho. Bryan went up on top again on the top rope, and he delivered a massive diving headbutt to the back of Jericho, and he ended up going for the cover. Jericho ended up kicking out. So Bryan was delivering the yes kicks to Jericho while he was on his knees. Jericho ended up ducking a head kick. Jericho then ended up hitting a release German suplex to Bryan, and he then hit the triangle drop kick as he knocked Bryan to the outside. Jericho then ended up hitting a triangle body press to the outside. So both guys were back into the ring. Jericho was slapping Bryan. Bryan went back up to his feet, and he was pissed. And both Bryan and Jericho were fired up, and they were delivering some massive chops to each other. Jericho's chest was all red from those chops. So Jericho delivered more chops to Bryan. Bryan ended up whipping Jericho into the corner and countered with a moonsault. So Bryan bounced off the ropes, and he delivered a double crossbody to Jericho. So both men were down. So as Dynamite came back from the commercial, Bryan was up on the top rope. Jericho ended up setting him up, and he ended up hitting a hurricanrana. Bryan avoided the Judas effect and hit a bridging German suplex, and Jericho ended up kicking out of that. Bryan then transitioned into the cow mutilation, and Jericho turned out of it. Bryan kept control of the match, ended up hitting the hammer and anvil elbows to Jericho. Jericho ended up catching one of the elbows, ended up hitting shots of his own to Bryan. So we had Bryan end up coming back, end up hitting the Buasaku knee to Jericho because Jericho hit the code breaker. So Jericho was on the apron. Both men delivered some shots to each other. Jericho suplexed Bryan to the outside, and at that point, Bryan landed hard on his ankle. So Dr. Sampson ended up checking in on Bryan's ankle. Jericho ended up pushing him off, and Jericho ripped off the kick pad of Bryan, and he started punching Bryan's foot. So he ended up wrapping Bryan's leg multiple times around the ring post, and he locked in the figure four. Bryan was basically on one foot, and Jericho ended up hitting him with a chop block, followed up by a knee breaker. So at the end of the match, we had Bryan end up locking in the label lock on Jericho. Jericho hammered across the face, and Bryan ended up wrenching back, ended up digging his fingers into Jericho's face. Jericho had nowhere to go, so Bryan still had the label lock on him. Jericho ended up tapping out, and so there you go. Bryan ended up winning, so he will face JON MOXLEY next week at Grand Slam, and we will crown a new AEW World Champion next week, whether it be Moxley or Bryan. Post-match, Moxley ended up coming down. He got into the ring. Both men were chatting it up, and both guys ended up shaking hands as a sign of respect. And that's how Dynamite went off the air. Overall, this was a very good match from both of these guys, and I can't wait to witness the match live next week. It's going to be a fantastic match. Bryan and also JON MOXLEY going at it. You know, Blackpool Combat Club versus Blackpool Combat Club. It's going to be amazing. And my prediction, I will want to see Bryan win the title. I think Bryan deserves the title. If Moxley wins, I wouldn't mind. But as we all know, MJF receives a future shot at the World Championship. He won the Casino Ladder match at All Out. So my prediction is, and I know they probably won't do this, but imagine if we see next week Bryan wins the match and wins the AEW World Championship. Could we possibly see MJF coming out there, pulling a Seth Rollins, and facing Bryan for the AEW World Championship? MJF pins Bryan and wins the AEW World Championship. So, I'm just throwing it out there. They may not do that, but that would be pretty cool to see. But then you got to think about it. Dynamite's going to be in Seattle, I think, in January. And then if MJF wins the title, wins the AEW World Championship, and we get another match with MJF and Bryan at that Dynamite in January in Seattle, because that's in Bryan's hometown, Bryan could win back the title. And that will be a short reign for MJF. But I don't want to see MJF have a short title run. But I was just throwing that idea out there. They won't do that, possibly. But can you imagine if they did that? But I'm really interested into where they're taking this. But Dynamite tonight, very good show, very entertaining. But anyways, that's it for my review of tonight's Dynamite. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Definitely give the video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all on Friday for SmackDown and AEW Rampage. So, see you then.